The dispatch came through at 12:17 a.m. A man's voice, steady but strained, reported his wife unresponsive in their San Clemente home. When paramedics arrived at the two-story house with a garden that neighbors called beautiful, they found Linda Curry already gone. Her body was still warm. The bedroom looked undisturbed. No signs of struggle, no overturned furniture, nothing that screamed violence. Just a woman who appeared to have slipped away in her sleep. But in the corner of that quiet room, one paramedic noticed something that didn't sit right. Her husband stood watching, arms crossed, face unreadable. Not crying, not pacing, just watching. Within hours, Linda's closest friends would hear the news, and every single one of them would think the same thing. He finally did it. Because for nearly a year, they had been watching what they believed was a slow, deliberate attempt to kill her. And now, in the early hours of June 9th, 1994, it looked like he had succeeded. To understand how a marriage ends with a body and a 911 call, you have to go back to the woman Linda was before Paul Curry ever entered her life. She grew up in a home where love was abundant, where her bond with her sister became the foundation of everything she trusted. By the time she reached her 40s, Linda had survived 2 divorces and a long relationship that never became a marriage. But she never stopped believing. Friends describe her as warm, generous, the kind of person who made you feel welcome the moment you walked through her door. She worked her way up at Southern California Edison, rising from secretary to manager at the San Onofre nuclear plant. She earned respect. She built a life. And at 45, she bought a large house in San Clemente with a garden that matched her spirit. Open, bright, full of possibility. That house became a gathering place. Laughter lived there. Hope lived there. Until the day a younger man with a sharp mind and carefully crafted credentials walked into her world. Paul Curry arrived at Southern California Edison in 1989, and from the beginning, he made sure people noticed. He was 32, confident, and relentless about broadcasting his intelligence. He talked about being a member of Mensa. He mentioned his engineering background at every opportunity. In late 1989, he even appeared on Jeopardy, winning 2 consecutive nights and taking home over $24,000. Linda was intrigued. Here was a man who seemed sharp, stable, someone who could match her ambition. Her friends saw something different. They saw arrogance disguised as confidence. They saw a man who talked more about himself than he listened to anyone else. But Linda, still hopeful after so much disappointment, chose to see potential. Their work conversations became personal. Friendship turned to romance. By 1991, Paul had moved into her San Clemente home. And on September 12, 1992, they drove to Las Vegas and got married in a simple ceremony. Linda believed she had finally found her partner. Her friends believed she had made a terrible mistake. The problem started almost immediately. Together, Linda and Paul were earning close to $140,000 a year, a substantial income in the early 1990s. But money became tight in ways Linda didn't understand. Bills piled up. Credit card debt grew. She began feeling financial pressure she had never experienced before. Then she discovered why. Paul had been married twice before. He had 3 children from those marriages, and he was financially responsible for all of them. Details he had minimized or outright concealed until after the wedding. For Linda, the revelation was devastating. She had been lied to about something fundamental, but she wasn't ready to give up. She forgave him. She told herself every marriage had challenges. Her friends, especially her best friend Mary, saw it differently. They saw a man who had hidden his past because honesty would have cost him access to Linda's life, her home, and eventually, her money. And then Paul started talking about insurance. Specifically, a new $1 million life insurance policy he wanted Linda to sign. Linda already had life insurance, several policies, in fact, totaling close to $1 million. Paul was listed as the primary beneficiary on $400,000 of that coverage. So when he started pushing for an additional policy, this one worth $1 million, Mary immediately saw danger. She pulled Linda aside and told her plainly, "Don't sign it." She reminded Linda of the lies Paul had already told, the financial secrets he had kept, the way he seemed more focused on security than affection. For once, Linda listened. She didn't sign the new policy, but the request itself left a mark. It planted a seed of doubt that would grow in the months ahead. Because when someone pushes that hard for life insurance, especially when coverage already exists, it stops feeling like financial planning. It starts feeling like preparation for something else. And in early 1993, just months into the marriage, Linda's health began to fail in ways no one could explain. The timing, her friends would later say, was too perfect to ignore. By mid-1993, Linda's worry had grown into something she couldn't ignore alone. She confided in Frankie, a trusted friend and co-worker from the power plant, and asked her to do something unusual: stay at the house for a few days. Watch Paul. See what Linda couldn't see when she was inside the marriage. Frankie agreed. She observed carefully, looking for signs of the coldness and control Linda's other friends had described. But what she saw surprised her. Paul seemed attentive. He drew bubble baths for Linda. He prepared fresh salads. He spoke gently, moved carefully, played the part of a concerned husband. Frankie left reassured, convinced that perhaps Linda's fears and Mary's suspicions were overblown. She told Linda she had nothing to worry about. But what Frankie didn't realize was that she had been watching a performance. Because the most dangerous people don't reveal themselves when someone else is in the room. They wait. And just weeks after Frankie left, Linda collapsed for the first time. In July 1993, Linda's body began to betray her. She experienced severe stomach pain, crushing fatigue, and rapid weight loss that left her visibly weakened. Friends who saw her were alarmed. This wasn't the vibrant woman they knew. Doctors ran tests, searching for explanations: cancer, infection, autoimmune disease, but nothing came back definitive. The illness had no clear name, no obvious cause. Eventually, Linda was admitted to the hospital, too weak to function on her own. Her condition was serious enough that people close to her began preparing for the worst. And through it all, Paul remained at her bedside. He stayed for hours. He held her hand. He spoke in soft, reassuring tones. To the hospital staff, he looked like a devoted husband. To Linda's friends, especially Mary, his presence felt suffocating. But no one could have predicted what a nurse would notice just days into Linda's hospital stay. A small, disturbing detail that would turn suspicion into something far more concrete. The nurse held the bag up to the light, tilting it slightly. Something was wrong. The fluid inside looked cloudy, off color, wrong in a way that immediately triggered concern. For fluids are supposed to be clear. This wasn't. She alerted the attending physician, who ordered the bag sent to the lab for immediate analysis. When the results came back, the room went cold. The fluid contained lidocaine, a local anesthetic with no medical reason to be in a standard saline drip. Lidocaine, when injected directly into the bloodstream in sufficient quantities, can cause cardiac arrest. The discovery raised an immediate, chilling question. Was this a hospital error, or had someone deliberately contaminated Linda's fore? Investigators began looking at access. Who had been in the room? Who had opportunities to tamper with the line unobserved? And one name kept appearing in the timeline. Paul Curry. He had spent long hours alone with Linda, often while she was sedated or asleep. He was there when the nurses left. He was there when the shift changed. He was there when police interviewed Linda in her hospital bed. She was weak but lucid. They asked her directly, if someone wanted to harm her, who would have a motive? Linda paused. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she said Paul's name. She admitted he was the only person who stood to gain from her death, financially at least. The investigators leaned forward, sensing they were close to something. But then Linda did something that stunned them. She asked them to stop. She said she didn't want to believe her husband could do this. She insisted it must have been a hospital mistake. She refused to press charges or allow the investigation to continue. The case was quietly closed. Linda's friends were horrified. Mary begged her to see what was happening, to recognize the pattern forming in front of her. But Linda couldn't or wouldn't. To admit Paul was trying to kill her would mean admitting she had married the wrong man, ignored every warning, and put herself in mortal danger. So instead, she chose denial. And 21 days later, she went home. Returning to the San Clemente house should have felt like relief. But for Linda, it felt like stepping back into uncertainty. Her friends noticed a strange emotional fog around her, as if she was forcing normalcy into place one careful day at a time. She didn't talk about the hospital. She didn't talk about the lidocaine. She acted as though the nightmare had simply ended and life could resume. Paul, too, seemed to move forward seamlessly. He returned to work. He maintained his routines. To anyone watching from the outside, they looked like a couple recovering from a health scare. But inside that house, something had shifted. Linda's trust, already fragile, had cracked further. And though she tried to rebuild it, the foundation was no longer solid. Her friends stayed in contact, checking in more frequently, watching for signs. And in December 1993, just months after Linda's discharge, those signs returned with terrifying clarity. The same symptoms, the same unexplained collapse. And once again, Linda was rushed to the hospital. This time, the medical staff acted with heightened vigilance. Linda's history was noted. Her prior contamination was flagged. And when nurses noticed the same cloudy appearance in her fluid, they didn't wait. The bag was tested immediately. The results confirmed what everyone feared: lidocaine again. This was no longer an isolated incident. It was a pattern, and patterns don't happen by accident. The hospital implemented strict new protocols. No one was allowed to enter Linda's room without a nurse present. A sign was posted on her door, a quiet but unmistakable message. The restriction wasn't for all visitors. It was for one specific person, Paul Curry. The staff didn't say it out loud, but their actions spoke clearly. We think it's him, and we're not letting him get close to her again. Paul, for his part, maintained his composure. He denied any wrongdoing. He expressed confusion and hurt at the implication, but his behavior began to shift in small, telling ways. And one of those shifts would reveal just how calculating he truly was. Paul attempted to have Linda transferred. He requested a move to a different department within the hospital, somewhere the staff wouldn't know the history, somewhere the heightened protocols wouldn't follow. He framed it as concern for Linda's care, suggesting she might receive better treatment in a new environment. But the request raised immediate red flags. Why would a devoted husband want to move his wife away from the team that had just saved her life? Investigators saw through the tactic. They recognized it for what it was: an attempt to regain access, to reset the situation, to remove the safeguards that were now protecting Linda. The transfer was denied. Paul's denials became more emphatic. And once again, Linda defended him. She told the staff, told the investigators, told anyone who would listen that Paul would never hurt her. The cognitive dissonance was staggering. She had named him as the only person with motive. She had witnessed 2 separate poisonings. But she would not connect the dots that her friend saw so clearly. And so, once again, she was discharged. And once again, she went home. Before Linda left the hospital, she asked Mary to stop by the house and bring some of her personal belongings. Mary agreed, though the request felt strange. Linda could have asked Paul, who was there every day. When Mary walked through the front door of the San Clemente home, she froze. Spread across the coffee table were stacks of paperwork: life insurance documents, policy summaries, beneficiary forms, some with Linda's name, some with Paul's. Mary's hands shook as she looked through them. The papers hadn't been filed away. They were laid out, as if someone had been reviewing them, calculating, adding up totals. When Mary brought the belongings to the hospital, she told Linda what she had seen. Linda's face went pale. She insisted the papers hadn't been out when she left. She had been too sick to organize anything before the ambulance arrived, which meant only one person could have spread them across the table. Paul. Mary pressed harder than she ever had before. She begged Linda to see what was happening, to understand that this wasn't love, it was planning. For a brief moment, Linda seemed to waver, but then the door closed again. She thanked Mary, and she stopped calling as often. In the weeks that followed, the friendship between Linda and Mary slowly fractured. Calls became less frequent. Visits stopped altogether. Mary felt the distance growing, and she understood why. Linda couldn't reconcile the truth her friend was forcing her to see with the life she was trying to preserve. Denial doesn't just protect you from reality. It isolates you from the people trying to save you. And as Linda pulled away from Mary, she pulled away from the last line of defense she had. Paul, meanwhile, continued to present himself as a caring husband. He attended to Linda's needs. He maintained his routines. He played his part with precision. But behind the facade, the pressure was building. Financially, the couple was struggling. Emotionally, Linda was withdrawing. And Paul, who had spent years constructing an image of brilliance and success, was beginning to realize that image wouldn't hold forever. On June 9th, 1994, Mary received an email. It was from Paul, his first direct contact with her. The message was brief. Linda is seriously ill. She might not make it. Hours later, the 911 call came. The paramedics worked quickly, but there was nothing they could do. Linda Curry was pronounced dead at the scene. Paul stood in the hallway, arms at his sides, face blank. When questioned, he said Linda had complained of feeling unwell earlier in the evening. He said she had gone to bed, and when he checked on her later, she wasn't breathing. The story was simple, almost too simple, but without immediate evidence of foul play. The case initially appeared to be a tragic but natural death. It wasn't until the autopsy results came back that everything changed. Toxicology revealed catastrophic levels of nicotine in Linda's system, levels consistent with acute poisoning. Linda wasn't a smoker. She had never used nicotine products. The amount in her bloodstream didn't come from secondhand exposure or accidental ingestion. It came from a concentrated source, introduced deliberately. Alongside the nicotine, the lab found significant levels of a sleep aid, enough to ensure Linda wouldn't wake up, wouldn't resist, wouldn't call for help. The medical examiner's conclusion was unambiguous. This was homicide. The news spread quickly through Linda's circle of friends. For Mary, the confirmation brought no satisfaction, only a deep, aching grief. She had seen it coming. She had warned Linda. And now, Linda was gone. Investigators moved quickly, but they faced a significant problem. While the toxicology was damning, there was no direct physical evidence linking Paul to the administration of nicotine. No syringe, no vial, no confession. Paul hired an attorney and stopped talking to police. He expressed shock and sorrow at Linda's death. He claimed ignorance about the poisoning. And without a smoking gun, the case stalled. Meanwhile, Paul moved forward with unsettling efficiency. He filed claims on Linda's life insurance policies. He collected funds from her retirement accounts. In total, he received approximately $419,000. Linda's sister, named in Linda's will, received a portion of the estate as well, a final gesture from a woman who had always tried to take care of the people she loved. Paul, it seemed, had gotten away with it, but the story didn't end there. As investigators dug deeper into Paul Curry's background, the carefully constructed image he had built began to crumble. His claim of being a nuclear engineer? False. He had never completed his degree. His membership in Mensa? A fabrication. Even his Jeopardy winnings, which were real, had been inflated in the stories he told. Paul Curry was not the genius he pretended to be. He was a man who had built his identity on lies, and those lies had been convincing enough to secure him a job, a wife, and access to significant financial resources. When Southern California Edison eventually uncovered his fraudulent credentials, they allowed him to resign quietly, without scandal, without a public record of his deception. It was a kindness he didn't deserve, and it allowed him to vanish. Paul sold the San Clemente house, the home Linda had bought, the home where she had welcomed friends, where she had believed she was building a future. He took the money and moved halfway across the country to Salina, Kansas, where he reinvented himself once again. New job, new wife, new life. To anyone who didn't know Linda's story, Paul Curry looked like a man who had survived tragedy and moved forward. For years, the case sat cold. Linda's friends mourned. Her sister carried the weight of unanswered questions. And Paul Curry lived freely in Kansas, working as a city building inspector, remarried to a woman named Teresa who had no idea what he had done. But in 2007, a cold case investigator named Yvonne Schultz decided the file deserved another look. Schultz was methodical, patient, and unwilling to accept that Paul had simply gotten away with it. She reviewed every piece of evidence. She reread witness statements. She studied the toxicology reports. And she came to a simple, logical conclusion. If Linda couldn't have administered the fatal dose herself, and if Paul was the only other person in the house, then the answer was clear. But Schultz needed more than logic. She needed Paul's own words. So in 2009, she reached out to him. She posed as a friendly investigator, someone just tying up loose ends, closing out old paperwork. Paul, confident that he had beaten the system years earlier, agreed to talk. And every conversation was recorded. Schultz didn't rush. She let Paul talk. She asked open-ended questions. She expressed sympathy. And slowly, carefully, Paul began to contradict himself. Small details shifted. Timelines changed. His description of how he found Linda's body varied between calls. He stumbled over which medications Linda had been taking. He offered explanations that raised more questions than they answered. Schultz never confronted him directly. She simply listened, took notes, and let Paul dig himself deeper. After months of recorded conversations, Schultz traveled to Kansas. She met Paul in person, maintaining the same friendly, non-threatening demeanor. They talked for over an hour. Paul seemed relaxed, almost pleased to be sharing his version of events again. And then, at the right moment, Schultz gave a signal. Local officers moved in. Paul Curry was arrested on a warrant for the 1994 murder of Linda Curry. The look on his face, witnesses later said, was one of complete shock. He had believed he was untouchable. He had been wrong. The trial began on September 11th, 2014, 20 years after Linda's death. Prosecutors laid out the case methodically. They presented the hospital poisonings, the contaminated 4 bags, the insurance pressure, the toxicology results, and the timeline of Paul's behavior before and after Linda's death. Expert witnesses testified that Linda had been injected with liquid nicotine, likely behind her ear while she was sedated by the sleep aid. The defense attacked the lack of direct physical evidence. They argued that without a syringe, without a vial, without a witness to the act itself, the case was circumstantial. They offered alternative theories, none of which held up under scrutiny. And then the prosecution played the recordings. Hours of Paul Curry talking, contradicting himself, offering explanations that didn't align with the evidence. The jury listened. They deliberated. And on September 30th, 2014, they returned a verdict. Guilty of first-degree murder with special circumstances and guilty of insurance fraud. The courtroom was silent as the judge pronounced the sentence. Life in prison without the possibility of parole. Linda's sister sat in the gallery, tears streaming down her face. She had waited 2 decades for this moment. She had kept Linda's memory alive, had pushed investigators, had refused to let the case disappear. Now, finally there was justice. But justice didn't bring Linda back. It didn't erase the years of wondering, the nights of knowing what had happened but being unable to prove it. Paul was led out of the courtroom in handcuffs. He didn't look at Linda's sister. He didn't look at anyone. For a man who had spent his life crafting an image of intelligence and superiority, the final scene was one of silence and defeat. But even in that moment, questions lingered. How many times had Paul tried to kill Linda before he succeeded? Had the hospital poisonings been practice runs, tests to see if he could get away with it? And how close had Linda come to escaping? If only she had trusted her friends, if only she had left when the warnings were still just warnings. In the years since Paul's conviction, Linda's story has been examined, retold, and studied. It has become a case study in coercive control, in the dangers of isolation, in the way love, or the hope of it, can blind someone to even the most obvious threats. Linda's friends still carry the weight of what happened. Mary, in particular, has spoken publicly about the guilt she feels, the belief that she should have done more, said more, found a way to pull Linda out of that house before it was too late. But those who study cases like Linda's know the truth. Victims of intimate partner violence face an average of 7 attempts to leave before they succeed, and some never get the chance. Linda's story isn't just about a man who poisoned his wife for money. It's about a system that didn't protect her, friends who saw the danger but couldn't intervene, and a woman who believed, despite everything, that love could survive if she just tried hard enough. It couldn't, and she didn't. Paul Curry remains incarcerated in California, serving a life sentence without parole. He has never confessed. He has never expressed remorse. In interviews, he continues to maintain his innocence, insisting that Linda's death was a tragic mystery he had nothing to do with. But the evidence, the timeline, and his own recorded words tell a different story. They tell the story of a man who built his life on deception, who married a woman for financial gain, and who, when that gain was threatened, chose murder over honesty. They tell the story of a woman who deserved better protection, better warning systems, better friends who could have done more than just watch. But most of all, they tell a story that happens far more often than we want to believe. Someone you love, someone you trust, someone you share a home with, can be the person most dangerous to you. And the scariest part isn't that it happened. It's how long it took for anyone to stop it. Linda Curry was 49 years old when she died. She had survived 2 divorces. She had built a career. She had bought a home. She had opened her life to friends, to laughter, to hope. And in the end, the man she chose to trust took all of that away. Her story serves as a reminder that danger doesn't always announce itself with violence. Sometimes it arrives quietly, disguised as concern, as love, as a partner who wants to take care of you. Sometimes it waits until you're too isolated, too exhausted, too hopeful to see it clearly. And by the time you do, it may already be too late. Linda's friends saw it. Her family saw it. The hospital staff saw it. But the one person who needed to see it most, the one person whose life depended on it, couldn't. Because to see it would mean admitting that the life she had built, the hope she had clung to, was built on a lie. And that admission was more than she could bear. Sometimes the most terrifying thing about evil isn't that it exists. It's how ordinary it can look when it's sitting right beside you. Paul Curry wasn't a stranger lurking in the shadows. He was a co-worker, a husband, a man who appeared on a game show and won. He seemed normal. He seemed safe. And that's what made him dangerous. Linda Curry's story ended in a courtroom 2 decades after her death. But the questions it raises will never fully be answered. How many others are living with someone they shouldn't trust? How many warning signs are being ignored right now? In homes that look just as normal as Linda's did? And how do we, as a society, create systems that protect people before it's too late, not just after? If Linda's story does anything, it should make us pause. It should make us listen when friends express concern. It should make us take seriously the signs that someone we love might be in danger. Because the cost of ignoring those signs isn't just a sad story. It's a life. And once it's gone, no amount of justice can bring it back. If this case left you thinking, you're not alone. Stories like Linda's remind us that the truth is often hiding in plain sight. We just have to be willing to see it. Here at True Crime Files Gist, we bring you real cases that matter, stories that make you question, reflect, and stay vigilant. If you want more deep dives into cases that expose the fragile line between trust and danger, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and share this story with someone who needs to hear it. We post new true crime investigations regularly, because the more we understand these stories, the better we can protect the people we love. Stay sharp, stay safe, and we'll see you in the next case.